Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. There are many styles of fighting, flinging fireballs to turn your foes into piles of ash, or your rogue who sneaks about and drives knives into their targets and slips away, or the warrior who cleaves down foes with a blade, and looking far away is the archer who sends forth arrow after arrow. But what about the monk, the warrior who punches their opponents into submission? Now, we need to define the monk. The term comes from Greek monotros, and it was meant to mean someone who separates themselves as part of their religion, either living alone or in a monastery. So yes, a monk is basically the same thing as a cleric. Yet in the more modern era, the term monk has shifted more to Asian religions. This can work as a way to distinguish similar roles in different areas. Regardless of Eastern or Western, the monk is often involved in certain tasks, including fasting, meditation, study, and more. They are knowledgeable about their religion and its teachings. So, in a fantasy world, they would likely end up as a spellcaster, which is what the cleric often is. But a very common trick to separate the monk and cleric is that the monk tends to focus more on the idea of a Shaolin monk. This subset of Buddhist monks incorporate physical training and discipline into their practices, in addition to their study of philosophy and medicine. Their physical training goes from simple calisthenics to full-on martial arts training. Now, martial arts aren't unique to Asian cultures. Every nation has its own martial arts scheme. Literally, martial arts is just the study of combat, ranging from unarmed combat to using weapons. Part of this idea is tied into defending their monastery and others from bandits and raiders. Often in war, sacred sites were pillaged and destroyed. They might have some gold inside, and were important to the culture and surrounding area. And this we do see even in Shaolin monks. For weapons, they use spears, staves, modified farming tools, swords, axes, and knives. A pretty standard fare. But it is the unarmed combat which most fantasy series focus. If not, they give them a staff. Of course, a big influence are the martial arts movies, and who doesn't love such a simple movie idea, where our hero uses techniques to punch and throw his way through a much stronger foe, all upholding the superhuman feats of athleticism and acrobatics. And I do have a problem with monks in fantasy worlds. These are worlds filled with monsters, beasts of power and magic. We got elves and orcs running around. These are worlds where humans are often weaker and less agile than most of what they have to fight. We got paladins in heavy armor wielding shields. They are basically walking walls. And they are picking fights with stone monsters and dragons with scales as tough as steel. And the unarmed monk is going to walk up and punch them? Have you seen what happens when you punch a boulder? Most of the time, the boulder wins, and badly too. I'm sorry, no. The unarmed monk is going to get hurt, unless they can do two things. First off is to increase their durability. Now we do see this in some of the more absurd martial arts movies and series. Our martial artist has mastery of their body, and their muscles are so toned that they can deflect blades and stop bullets. Physically impossible to be honest, but we are setting them in a world where there is magic. So say this is a buff spell or something. If they don't have this, they can dodge attacks using speed to stay safe. But the problem comes back to punching things. If you punch a fire elemental, it'll burn you. Or punch a spike monster? That means you'll need a way to up your defenses, else you won't last long as an adventurer. You'll lose a limb, and then another, then have to retire, assuming that there isn't magic to grow back limbs. And then we have the second part, improving your strength. We're talking about our monk, sauntering up to a dragon and throwing fists. This would be like a hamster slapping your leg. Will that hurt? Not really. What if we give the hamster the strength of a rabbit? Well, you'll feel it now. So this is what the monk will need to do again. They need to buff themselves up. But how much? Well, when fighting human-sized foes, they may be wearing plate armor, so enough to handle that. Except many martial arts exploit joint locks and other countermeasures against stronger foes and will work on armored foes as well. Except for one little issue. It won't work on a dragon. What, are you going to try to judo throw a dragon? Yeah, I don't think so. Standard martial arts isn't going to work against a lot of magical creatures. Not a chance. This is why the monk will need magic to bolster their durability and strength. Yet, there is a spell which might help. I compare the monk to a hamster, but what if we make our hamster a giant hamster? One the size of a human? Well, now it is a fairer fight. If the monk can enlarge themselves, now they might be able to use their joint locks and counter grabs to bring down or at least incapacitate a dragon. That could be something to see. It would be like a martial artist going toe to toe with a tiger. Yet there is another option. Keeping with the hamster metaphor, why doesn't the hamster just bite the human? That will hurt a lot more than a hamster punch. And that is my point. Teeth are like weapons. And what happens if a monk picks up a weapon? They can improve their attack power and damage potential. They even did this in history. The Shaolin monks did use weapons. Yes, most were simple staves and modified farming tools, but they did. And we all know how useful a club is. So this brings up the biggest issue of a monk in a fantasy world. No, they shouldn't be fighting barehanded. They should be using weapons. Yes, there's a whole host of martial arts that use weapons, so that is how they should fight. All of this we have talked about is only the idea of a brute that throws punches and kicks. But that wasn't their focus. These were religious leaders, not meat-headed thugs. On this front, they should likely be more akin to a cleric. But isn't a paladin just a martial version of a cleric? Well, sort of, but there is a distinction. Remember, in the more modern sense, monk refers to Eastern religions, and the Shaolin were heavily tied to Buddhism. At its core, they are very different. Buddhism doesn't draw their power from a god, but from finding their own path on the middle way. This means that their power won't come from a god, but from ties with karma and self. They could be drawing power from the world around them. Perhaps this is achieved through meditation. In this way, we could distinguish a monk from a cleric or a paladin. Since monks also practice medicine, we could argue that a monk should also be a healer. This could also play into them serving as a spiritual leader in the community. Some versions of Eastern monks are involved with sealing and defeating demons and magical beasts, so their magic might be able to do that. And this magic should also be used to enhance their physical abilities. Honestly, the idea of a monk fighting using only martial arts doesn't hold up too well. No, they definitely need to use magic, and would also benefit from using a weapon at least. So not a perfect match, but you can make it work. So how does a monk fit into a fantasy world? Well, they should probably be associated with one religion or another depending on the world building. That is where you will most likely find them, to be sure. Their homes could serve as safe havens for travelers. They may cure curses laid upon unfortunate individuals. Many of the monks may either come from those that committed themselves to that way of life, yet they could also take in orphans and street urchins. They will likely be teaching their philosophies to the local students, attempting to guide them onwards. Their monasteries and temples may serve as a guidance during ceremonies and events throughout the region. This would likely mirror what we see in our world. However, pilgrimages were common in history and would happen here too. This could be one reason that the monk joins up with adventurers, as part of their religious works. Have them go and protect others. In addition, needing to thwart attempts on their monasteries should make them skilled combatants at the very least. I said it earlier, there are many tales of monks sealing away demons, so doing so as an adventurer does make sense. They may defeat demons and monsters, such as with the tale of Journey to the West, where our heroes defeated many such foes in their journey to retrieve the sutras. How far they go is up for debate and may range with the individual. Though I don't think you would get monks and clerics living in the same monasteries. It is possible that if the two gain their powers from different religious methods, could make things difficult to handle. Though depending on how you do things, it might be possible to have a druid and a monk work together. Their religions are based on natural philosophy and would likely be a better match for the monks. Monks would likely be trusted during their travels. Their presence would likely be taken as positive, at least in their native lands. Overall, I think a monk would fit into a fantasy world fairly easy if you make a few certain changes. They could serve similar roles as what they do in our world. But if they wish to be an adventurer, they will need the addition of magic to even stand a chance. Else, I don't see them lasting too many battles. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.